Hey, we are so glad you joined us here on 100 Huntley Street. Always inspiring program and great guests. And, you know, we just like to be real and make ourselves vulnerable to you. So, Cheryl Weber, do you have any pet peeves?
Oh, well, no.
Those doesn't involve me.
Yeah, sorry. Well, when Greg...
Yeah.
You know what my biggest pet peeve is, honestly, is when people drive slow in the fast lane, and all 3 lanes of traffic here are all going the same speed, you know? And you can't get around anybody, you can't get through anybody. It just goes on for like 30 minutes, and you're just like, get out of my way. Get that. Okay, yeah. Maybe a tiny little bit.
Just a tiny bit?
Yeah, impatient,
Do you start to pray, oh, Lord, give me peace? No? Get out of my way.
You know what I have learned, though, and this is a great tip for anybody out there that ever has had road rage or struggles with impatience on the road. I get books on tape from the library, or even now I can download it on an app on my phone for free, and I listen to stories, and that cuts through so much frustration because I'm totally caught up in the story, and I don't notice all the crazy people on the road.
Yeah, and I do that when I find out my flight has been late 4 hours. Hey, I got 20 of them here. Oh, I only got 30 seconds. Okay, one of them is when I am in the express line at the supermarket, 12 items or less, and I'm in a hurry, and the guy's got 20 items in there.
Or like 12 and a half.
12 and a, yeah, or 12, well, I'm not, a little bit of grace. And the other one, because I asked my wife about this, I said, what are my pet peeves? You're always turning the lights off. Leave the lights on when I'm in the living room.
You're trying to save power. I get it, but perhaps those are the little things that cause rubs between couples.
Yeah.
Anyway, today we have Village Church Pastor Mark Clark from Vancouver. He's going to give us some great insights into what he calls the problem of God. He's going to talk about feelings, those feelings of frustration that you and I have, and how they might be different from truth and reality. He really has a great viewpoint on a number of things that people struggle with when it comes to God.
I will be listening very intently. You know, slavery is a word that, you know, we really don't like. It's a concept, Cheryl, I don't think people really want to talk about. But we'd like to think that slavery has been abolished, but has it really?
Well, I caught up with author and advocate Danielle Strickland to discuss slavery and how it impacts every one of us in this day and age.
And here is Cheryl and Danielle.
New figures released last year reveal how big slavery still is in the world today. 40 million people are enslaved right now. My guest today is a passionate anti-slavery advocate who says the problem is not just with those people over there that are in slavery, but that we all carry a story of oppression within us. Danielle Strickland, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's a great joy to be here.
Now that's pretty provocative, that we all carry a story of oppression. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean that oppression implicates all of us. Wherever oppression is present in the world, everyone's kind of contributing to it in some fashion. I mean that slavery happens outside of us to other people, but also the systems of oppression and slavery that happen include us. So that there's no way we can kind of dismiss it as somebody else's problem. I mean, right from when people are trafficked for sex trafficking is a big deal. A lot of times we'll say in Cambodia or in India and those are all true, that's happening. We should stop it. I'm like a big advocate of that. But it's also happening in Canada. It's also happening in your local town. It's also happening in your local city. So there's like, it's actually happening everywhere all the time. So that's one thing. But also, too, is the systems that oppress people that allow it to continue to happen, we're all a part of. So it's having that conversation, a real frank one and a personal one about how we can stop the oppression that we're part of.
So in a little bit, I want to go over some things that we can do to stop oppression. But one of the things that fascinated me, and you wrote about this in your book, The Ultimate Exodus, that we have things within us sometimes that allow us personally to be oppressed, and that even though you want to blame the oppressor, there's actually something in us, could be a victim mentality or some other things. Tell me what they are. What are the things that cause us to be oppressed?
Yeah, I mean, the number one is fear. And actually, one of the things that really struck me when I was researching the Exodus story, I kind of think I already realized that fear was the means by which people became oppressed. What I didn't realize until I read Exodus chapter 1, where it says that Pharaoh, who is this guy that's like the chief, of all the oppression that happens to the Israelites in this story, it says that because he was afraid of the Israelites, he oppressed them. And I suddenly had this kind of like aha moment that if fear is a dominating reason for any decision that you make, you either will be oppressed or you'll be an oppressor. But that actually fear is the currency of oppression. It's how it works. So in our world we're living in today, where fear is like at the root of almost every decision. I mean, political decisions, economic decisions, but even personal family decisions, the future of your children decisions. I mean, all of these things that where fear is the driving factor, we're gonna be, if we're participating in that fear as a dominant reason we're making those choices, we will either be oppressed or we'll be an oppressor. But you better bet we're going to be part of a system of oppression.
You referenced the Exodus story, a story in the Bible,
yeah,
about how the Egyptians were oppressing the Israelites, or keeping them as slaves,
yes,
in a sense. So can you just summarize that story, or just the highlights of
yeah, absolutely.
How this
and I always start, you know, the story actually starts before the book of Exodus, and which is the second book of the Bible. It starts in Genesis, where the Egyptians saved the Israelites from starvation, and the Israelites have saved Egypt from starvation. So actually it starts in this blessing, this relationship of mutuality and blessing. So it's really interesting. It's important to start there. Somehow the story unfolds, and 300 years later, after this kind of mutuality of blessing, there is this system of oppression that started. And the Israelites are feeling oppressed by Pharaoh, who's the leader, who actually, you know, the legend would have it is the incarnation of God. So he's kind of this like godlike figure, and the most powerful man on the planet. And he begins systemically oppressing the Israelites. The Israelites cry out to God, and God hears their cry. The character of Moses is then born, and he kind of is saved miraculously, and he makes it to the palace. And then from the palace, he gets kind of like off track. We're like, what's happening to the story? We thought it was going this incredibly dominant way. He gets sent to the wilderness, really running for his life. And while he's there, he's shepherding in Midian. He is interrupted by God, and there's a burning bush, and God says to him, can you hear the cry of my people? I need you to come and help facilitate the freedom. So in essence, it's a blueprint, I think, story of God's desire to see his people be who it is that he's called them to be, which of course freedom is part of that calling.
And you know, when you think about the fact that we can all be oppressed through fear or be an oppressor, but let's start with being oppressed. How does a victim mentality play into that? Yeah,
you know, I think it's really, really interesting. One of the things that has really captivated me about the Exodus story in my own journey of freedom is that I've always identified, when I read the story of Exodus, I always identify with the Israelites. I am always like, oh, where am I oppressed? Like, where am I suffering? And then I'm like, where is God calling me to freedom? I think that's a really good, you know, exercise to do. But here's what would really change me forever is I started realizing that if I was actually going to break down the story elements and pick a person to relate to in the scriptures, I would if I was going to be honest about where I am in the global wealth index, where I am in the world in terms of like power and privilege, I would actually identify more with the Egyptians. And so then I started thinking, like, what would happen to me if I read the Exodus story from the Egyptian perspective? What is the invitation then that God's giving me to freedom? Because you know, God's purpose is even at the start of that relationship. That's why it's important we know that that relationship with Egypt started with blessing, because God's intention is to bless everybody. Like, God doesn't actually have, you know, just one favorite. I mean, this is kind of the revelation of the New Testament too, right? Where Jesus is just like, the good news is for everybody. It's like his intention is to bless the whole world. So if that's his intention and the world isn't being blessed, we then have to start to ask ourselves questions about, like, what's happening? What happened to this idea of blessing? And what happened to my calling as a child of God to bring blessing to the earth? How did I make enemies with people that I'm supposed to be blessing? And how does that happen? So I think even just who we identify within the story is a really good opportunity for us.
I want to unpack that a little bit further and talk about some things we can do, what you call a freedom workout, to help perpetuate that blessing and freedom in the world. We're going to talk about that when we come back.
I can't like not answer an email for one day. I can't take one day off with my kids just to spend time with them without any functional piece happening in my life. I just can't take a break. Then the definition of that is slavery.
We got a great show, guys. Lots to fit in, but we're gonna do it. In 3, 2.
We are in the business of delivering hope every single day.
When you watch 100 Huntley Street, you're going to hear stories of transformation, great Bible teaching, people who have been changed by God, and people who are changing the world for God. Greg, your guest, amazing.
It's one of those stories you wouldn't believe until you actually hear it.
I think 100 Huntley Street is for everyone. I think everyone has gone through times of loss. Everyone is looking for hope. Everyone's looking for purpose.
100 Huntley Street is the longest running daily television show in Canada and has literally changed generations. It's a two-way experience. 100 Huntley Street is not paid for by advertisers. It's the people across Canada, partners that are giving to this ministry.
Today, I'm going to bring you a story of someone whose life was transformed while on the show.
The proof that this ministry is really making a difference is the people that we hear from.
1,200 people a day call us for prayer, and we know that they're facing the end of their marriage. We know that they're facing their kids in crisis, a mental health issue, or a job loss, financial challenges, health challenges. And they talk about how their lives are being transformed by God's love through this program.
That's really what gives us that strength to continue on.
What motivates me is the fact that Jesus has done so much in my life. And I know of friends and family who have been transformed by Jesus. This is the reason why I love being a part of this ministry, is because Jesus is the hope.
We are 100% viewer supported. We are so passionate about this media mission of bringing the message of Jesus coast to coast across Canada. We cannot do it without you. Would you please consider supporting this vital media mission? You can give online at crossroads.ca/donate or call us at 1-800-265-3100.
We are back with Danielle Strickland talking about slavery and what we can do to fight it in our own lives and in the world around us. Before we get to those steps, I just want to ask you about, in your book, you talk about how money and work is a form of slavery because of how highly it's regarded in our culture. Can you unpack that for me?
Well, you know, one of the definitions of slavery is people who never stop working. Slaves are people who have no breaks, like who can't take a break, who actually aren't allowed. So in Scripture, there's this concept called the Sabbath, which is a day of rest. And when the Sabbath becomes a really big deal, it's right after the Israelites get out of Egypt. And that's when God says, this is actually a thing you have to do now. And you sort of think, why? Why do they have to rest? And you realize that it's one thing they don't know how to do because they've been slaves. So they've been caught up in a system that never rests. They were like on building projects that never stopped. They didn't know what it meant to take one day off. And in our culture, I mean, increasingly, even in my own life, I struggle with that same thing. If Sabbath is in defiance of slavery, and I start identifying areas of my life, like I can't take a 24-hour break from my phone. I can't like not answer an email for one day. I can't take one day off with my kids just to spend time with them without any functional peace happening in my life. I just can't take a break. Then the definition of that is slavery. It's a form of oppression. So I think identifying it and then going, oh, that's why God made it like a law that a break was in, because he was trying to train people how to live in freedom, not in slavery. So maybe that's kind of a corrective measure for us as we let the systems that are oppressing us, that are unrelentless. I mean, social media is just one example, but I think there's tons of people who have sacrificed many meaningful things on the altar of more money, more success, more status, you know, like just more. So they're coming home like when it's dark outside and not spending any quality time. When if they were going to measure their life on meaningful interactions, it would be kind of a shallow one.
I'm feeling so convicted right now. Okay, moving on.
And me too, just for the record.
I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah.
You talk about a freedom workout, which the Sabbath I know could be part of it. What are some other things that we can do to fight slavery and really live in freedom?
Yeah, I think the Sabbath is a really great practice just to identify where oppression might have a root in your life. I think being ruthlessly honest about where we're afraid is, I think, wherever fear is present as a dominant, you know, oppression's going to be present there, whatever side of oppression you're on. So really not being afraid to do that. I think those folks who we don't listen to, whose voices are excluded from our lives. So we look around at our lives and we sort of see like a monochrome voice, people that look like us, act like us, talk like us. It's a comfortable place to be. It's also the way society works. So I would always say one of the great ways to fight slavery is to be intentional about finding other voices. Listen to those excluded voices. In many ways, the Exodus story is about a marginalized voice being heard in a powerful spot. So what are ways that we can amplify those marginalized voices to speak to power, even our power in today's? I think I'd be ruthless about changing my own narrative. Do I keep convincing myself that I'm the victim, I'm the victim, I'm the victim? Is there an opportunity for me to just switch perspective for a second and really give God the ability to free me even from that narrative? Maybe I actually have more power than I thought. Maybe I can make some choices today that will lead me to freedom and that will actually help someone else get free. You know, so those are, and I think also a final step is just get started. Just get started working towards freedom. So if you've been so paralyzed by the idea of human slavery in the world, for example, so you've heard tons about it, but you're completely paralyzed because you're afraid, pay attention to the fear and lean in instead. Look into it. Expose yourself to like what the reality is. See where there might be some work going on in your local community that might help marginalized and excluded or vulnerable people, and just start volunteering there. And you just begin that process of becoming free yourself from your own fear, from your own sense of like, I can't contribute, all of those things. As you start confronting those things, you get more and more free. And here's something that is a fantastic way to end. Free people, free people.
So in other words, you're not going to be able to bring freedom to slavery around the world until you yourself get more free.
Yeah, and the more free you get, the more you're going to want to free people.
Oh, I love that. We could just go on and on about this. Danielle Strickland, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us about this today. You've given us a lot to think about.
You're welcome. It's a joy.
We'll be right back.
What I love about Danielle is she is so practical. One of the things I caught, and there were so many things there, that God wants us to be free so that we can be who He has created us to be, because often we have that question, why am I here? I know I had that question for many years as I was, getting into a broadcasting career. In 1982, it all changed when I began a relationship with Him. How I bumbled around trying to figure out why I'm here, yes. But, I just feel like God is directing me. And if you don't feel that way, I would encourage you to call right now and just talk to somebody. Say, I'm confused. Maybe you don't know Jesus in a personal way. Well, what a great day it would be to come into a relationship with Him. Give us a call, 1-866-273-4444, or you can also email us at prayer@crossroads.ca. Now, Cheryl's mentioning there was so much she wanted to talk to Danielle about. You know what? Good news. Danielle will be our Bible teacher next week, so we're looking forward to that. And this week we have from Vancouver Village Church Pastor Mark Clark, and he'll be joining us right after this.
We all feel like sometimes our prayers are bouncing off the ceiling and they're not really getting anywhere or going anywhere. And then we come to this psalm and we realize nothing could be further from the truth. That number one, God is a forgiving God. So even when you're not at your best spiritually, even when you're not hitting on all 8 cylinders, God understands it, God knows it. You can always come to God and talk to Him. And then we need to remember that God is a forever God. He's always there. The wonderful thing about God is you don't have to make an appointment, you don't have to sit in a waiting room, and you don't have to pay for His time. He's always there waiting to listen to you whenever you want to talk to Him. And then we remember that God is a faithful God. He keeps His promises. When you come into God's presence and you lay a request before God and you have a promise before you, you can know He will keep that promise. He will do exactly what He says He will do. And then we remember that God is a faultless God. He never makes a mistake. He always does what is best. He always does what is right. Well, if that's the kind of God that we're praying to, what greater motivation, Cheryl, should you and I and everyone who knows God and believes in God, what greater motivation should we have to take time every day on a constant, continuous basis to enter into His presence?
Call now with your donation and request your copy of 52 Weeks Through the Psalms devotional by Dr. James Merritt. 1-800-265-3100, or make your donation at crossroads.ca/donate. This one-year daily devotional will help you dive into God's Word and find new reasons to come before Him in prayer and praise. This book is our thanks for your ministry support. With your gift of $45 or more, we would love to send you this great devotional. Call 1-800-265-3100 or visit crossroads.ca/donate.
Hey, Mark Clark here, the author of The Problem of God, and we're exploring the reasons that skeptics don't believe in Christianity, and that was me growing up. And came to church when I was 19, had to work through the rational, historical, scientific claims of Christianity, begin to realize that it was the best idea in the marketplace of ideas. And one of the major issues that I had was the issue of exclusivity, meaning that Christianity claims to be the only way. Now, the first thing to say is it does claim that. Jesus said that I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Later in the book of Acts, they preach and they say there's no other name under heaven by which people can be saved other than the name of Jesus Christ. So it is an issue that is biblical. It is true that it does claim that. And so that offends us, of course, as North Americans because it feels very narrow and judgmental. But the reality is logically speaking, it actually makes sense. And what I mean by that is I know we live in a pluralistic culture. And so what we want is people to respect one another's views, and we should. But one of the mistakes that we make is the difference between cultural pluralism and metaphysical pluralism. And what I mean by that is we should fight for one another's beliefs, and Christians should too. That I should fight for your belief to believe whatever you want and respect you and love you. 100% that's true. The mistake we make is mistaking that kind of pluralism with metaphysical, which is that you're right in believing whatever you believe. And so what happens is I should fight for your right to believe it, but I shouldn't necessarily just say that every belief that you have is right. And that's where we're at as a culture because we're afraid to kind of challenge one another. I was golfing with a guy recently and he was saying it's not right for you to believe that Jesus is the only way and that's going to create division and conflict in life. And I said, okay, but some things are true and exclusivity is just the way truth works. And he said, what? I said, well, think about your daughter. What if she came home with a test and it said 2 + 2 and she wrote = 5 and the teacher marked it wrong and she looked at you and said, you know, Dad, I don't like all this cultural stuff being put on me. 2 + 2 = 5. I believe 2 + 2 = 5 and so it should be that. What would you say? And he said, well, if she wants to believe 2 + 2 = 5, then that's what she can believe and I'm not gonna critique her because of it, because that's her truth. Well, at that point, we've kind of lapsed into silliness because 2 + 2 = 4 in reality, according to math, according to the actual, there is truth. There is reality that we have to mine for. And if all we do is look to each other and say, whatever you believe about whether the earth, there's people who still believe the earth is flat. So if you're sitting with them over coffee and you don't want to create conflict, then you can just say, yeah, totally the earth is flat. Or you could say, we've actually been outside and looked back and taken pictures and it's totally not flat. You know, so there is a debate that we need to be able to have about truth, about mining out what is actually true. And so truth is exclusive because if one idea is right, either I'm wearing socks or I'm not wearing socks. Both opposite things, it's called the law of contradiction, can't be true at the same time. And so what we need to do is mine for things that are actually true. And so some people said, well, but when it comes to religion, we can never know. And so what we have to understand is that, and people say this to me all the time, they say, what about the metaphor of the elephant? You know, there's 4 blind men and they're holding on to different parts of the elephant. One's holding the trunk, one's holding the leg, one's holding the tail. And that's religion. We don't know, but we're all just holding different parts and we're trying to interpret reality. And one says, I'm holding onto a broom. And one says, I'm holding onto a tree. And that's just religion. But the reality of the actual metaphor breaks down because the whole story is being told by someone who can see the elephant, who can see reality itself. And so the metaphor or the picture is often given as trying to prove that we can never know ultimate truth. But the whole foundation of the story is that someone in the story does know ultimate truth, that there's an elephant. And so the story breaks down because the reality is there is reality, there's truth, and truth always excludes its opposite. And so when we come at this from a Western mindset, we tend to think all ideas are equal. But we also know that all ideas aren't equal. We have to exclude some ideas. Some religions believe that ancient religions used to take babies and throw them into a fire and beat a drum so they wouldn't hear them screaming offering to the gods of Moloch. Are those ideas the same as Christianity? Or is that idea just as good as love your neighbor? No. We recognize that there is value. Some ideas are better than other ideas. And so we have to come to terms with this and actually mine out, not just live under the banner of we're trying to get through Thanksgiving dinner, so your truth is your truth. The reality is there is exclusivity. There's a door that Jesus says, I'm the only way to actually experience God, because every other religious system tells you that you have to climb up the mountain by doing good things. If you're a good person, if you say these prayers, go on these things, help these people, then maybe you can be good enough to climb up the mountain and meet God. And one day he'll say, you lived a life good enough to come to heaven. That's most religious systems, if not all of them. Christianity says the opposite. It says that God came down the mountain because you could never earn your way to heaven. He was good and perfect for you. And so what we do is we trust in him, in his goodness. It's not about our performance in front of God. It's about God's performance for us in the person and the work of Jesus. And we come in behind that and hope that God judges us on his righteousness when we put our faith and trust in Jesus. If that idea is true, then all the other ideas are wrong. Now, there might be another idea that's right and Christianity is wrong. Maybe that's reality. But we can't all be right. One idea is right and everybody else is wrong, or we're all wrong. But the one thing we aren't is we're not all right. And that's the challenge of Christianity.
Wow, thank you, Pastor Mark. Now, years ago, more than 3.5 decades ago, I was at the Vancouver International Airport, and that's, of course, where Mark ministers, out in Vancouver. And I had been dating this young lady who lived in Alberta, and I was in Vancouver at the time. And we started talking about religion, Christianity. And this young lady said to me, no, Jesus is the only way. I said, no, that's narrow-minded, that's wrong. As long as you do more good than bad, then you will go to heaven. Well, I did not expect to ever see that young lady again. I've now been married to her for 36 years. She was right, and I had to grapple with that. And I know many of you are probably as well. Well, no, there's Jesus and there's all these other religions. You know, just pick one and we're all going to end up. Well, the reality is that Jesus said that he was the way, the truth, and life. The only way you get to God is through Jesus. I've heard others say, well, why is there only one way to get to heaven? Maybe there's many ways. No, but I'm glad there's one way, and it's Jesus.
And we can know it. And we hear people on this program every day who've had their lives transformed by that. My own dad, much like you, had the same belief that, you know, if I just do enough good in the world, he's kind of just a Sunday cultural Christian in a sense, then it hopefully will all add up. Well, it's kind of a scary way in a way, right? Just think well, I hope it's more than enough. Did I do enough good? And I think many religions are like that. People are always striving, but they never know. I think there's an assurance that you can have when you have a relationship with God that you will have eternity with him, and that he has reconciled yourself to him, and you know it because how can I even explain this, Greg? It's a feeling of peace and love in your heart that is beyond words, and you can see it on people's faces many times, just that incredible peace.
It is a peace, and we want you to have that peace today. So call our prayer lines if you don't know him, 1-866-273-4444. The thing is, you don't have to know everything. You just have to start the relationship. Hey, thanks for watching us. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you next time on 100 Huntley Street.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a member of the Canadian Council of Christian Charities. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 4M2.
Cheryl Weber's wardrobe provided by Melanie Lynn.
As a child fears the dark, we often fear what we can't see. The Bible reminds us 365 times not to fear, because God wants us to put our trust in Him. If you would like to see your way out of the dark, call our 24/7 prayer lines at 1-866-273-4444 or visit crossroads.ca/247prayer. Anytime, anywhere, we're here for you.
Castle is the first video streaming service that's been created to serve you, with high-quality, faith-based media for all ages and a live 24/7 prayer chat. Castle features Christian TV shows, documentaries, teaching series, and kids content. Start your free 30-day trial of Castle and discover this quality Christian resource made for your entertainment and your spiritual growth. Sign up now at intothecastle.com.